USS Constellation. There's a grand lady in Baltimore who has taken her rightful place as the Inner Harbor's crown jewel in the heart of the Chesapeake Bay. Launched in 1854. A newspaper account from the day of her launch reported that there were 8 pieces of the original frigate Constellation contained within her timbers.
Into the 1860s, and you are back in time on the Constellation, learning what it was like to be here.
People come on board and they get touched by this walking through history that they're able to do, and they're able to see the hammocks and see the officer's wardroom and sit in the captain's cabin.
And perfect for children, the other for adults. Plus, there's the ever-popular Powder Monkey Tour for kids and hands-on adult tours like A Ship as a Machine and Black Sailors in Navy Blue. Groups can also come aboard and sling their hammocks in our overnight program or host special events. But it's the sloop of war Constellation that's here in Baltimore today, and the Chesapeake Bay has always been central to her story.
In this small brick house on Amity Street in Baltimore, Maryland, lived Edgar Allan Poe. Residing here in his youth, it was a time in his life when his literary career took form and began to transition from poetry to short stories. Many of his works written here achieved critical acclaim, and his life as a writer began to take flight. Edgar's family had its roots in Baltimore. His great-great-grandparents came to the city from Ireland in 1755. And his grandfather, David Poe, fought in the American Revolution, becoming friends with George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. Although born in Boston, Edgar spent many years in Baltimore and had numerous associations here. It was in Baltimore that Edgar launched his literary career, and here that his mysterious death occurred. Several blocks east from this house, Edgar Allan Poe still resides in Baltimore in the Westminster Church Burying Ground alongside his wife and family. In the late 1820s, Edgar lived off and on in Baltimore with his cousins. Following an unsuccessful term at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and a broken relationship with his foster father, John Allen of Richmond, Virginia, Edgar returned to Baltimore in the spring of 1831 and moved in with his aunt, Maria Clem, in East Baltimore. On May 6, 1831, Edgar wrote to the owner of the Baltimore Gazette and Daily Advertiser looking for a job. In that letter, he stated that he was very anxious to remain and settle himself in Baltimore and no longer looked upon Richmond as his place of residence. Late in 1832 or early 1833, Maria Clem moved her household, including Edgar, from East Baltimore to this newly developed area outside the city limits. In its day, this area was considered the countryside. This little brick house on Amity Street was once a duplex. The two homes were separated by an arched doorway which led to a narrow passageway between them. The house had been built around 1830 for Charles Clausen. Maria Clem rented this house primarily with money from her mother's Revolutionary War widow's pension. Maria Clem's household included 5 people: herself, her ailing mother Elizabeth Cairns Poe, her daughter, and Edgar's future wife, Virginia Eliza Clem, her son Henry, and her nephew Edgar Allan Poe, who was now 23 years old when they moved into the house.
Welcome back. Now, as promised, we have Enrica Jang from the Edgar Allan Poe House Art Museum.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Now tell me a bit about the Poe House.
The Edgar Allan Poe House and Museum is a tiny house in West Baltimore where Edgar Allan Poe lived for about 2.5 years at the very start of his writing career. You may not know, Edgar Allan Poe was one of the first American writers to try to support himself entirely through writing. And Baltimore was the first place where he was first recognized for his work. He had focused on poetry, but then was moving into short stories, and he won an award here. This is the first money that he earned for writing. So I'm very proud here in Baltimore to be able to say that we recognized him first, and of course this is his resting place.
Awesome, thank you.
Poe had left West Point Academy and was trying to support himself as a writer here in the United States. He was one of the first Americans to try to support himself as a writer here in the United States. And he entered a contest for poetry and short story. As the story goes, the judges of the contest wanted to give him a prize for both the poetry and the short story, but they didn't want to give the prize to the same person, so they settled on his short story manuscripts in a bottle, and he won $50 for that short story. But as a poet, this was a change for him to start transitioning into short story, and to receive that money was very important for a very young and struggling writer. His family was not wealthy, and if you visit the Poe House, you'll see they came from very modest means. It's a very small, tiny house, and 5 people lived in it. So when visitors come, they're very surprised that such an eminent writer came from such a humble beginning, and it's wonderful to be able to show people what can come from very humble beginnings.
Definitely. And speaking of the Poe House, we actually have a clip that we can watch now.
Set of wooden stairs to the first room, the parlor. With a fireplace for warmth in the winter, this room would have been furnished modestly and primarily used to greet guests and for small family and social gatherings. The floors, walls, and mantel are all original to the house and would be familiar to Edgar today. Through a small door to the rear of the parlor are 2 steps that lead down to the kitchen. This room was extended about 5 feet in the 1930s, so would have been far smaller than it is today. In a simple but crowded household such as this, furnishings would have probably been limited to a small table for preparing food, and perhaps a chest or cabinet for storing cooking and eating utensils, and perhaps a chair. A kitchen of this size, with a hearth, would have been used strictly for cooking and laundry. In the heat of summer, cooking and laundry may have taken place just outside the door, in a small yard, perhaps under a canvas cover. In winter, the heat from the fire here would find its way up the winding staircase, delivering some comfort to the bedrooms above. The stairway to the second floor is narrow and winding, with a small landing at the top, which separates 3 distinct bedroom areas. No record exists of who slept in which room in this tiny house. Morals and polite society of the 1830s would dictate that Edgar and perhaps his cousin Henry would have slept in the same room while the women of the household occupied the other spaces. Turning left or east at the top of the stairs is a bedroom with a slanting ceiling, following the roof line at the rear of the home. While small, it could easily accommodate a couple of beds, along with some simple furnishings. 2 windows allow for light and ventilation, and look out over the narrow alley beside the house to the north. There is no fireplace in this room, relying instead on whatever heat was allowed to rise up the stairs. Across the staircase landing is the largest bedroom. This room has its own fireplace with 2 windows looking west over Amity Street in front. Poor families like the Clems weren't able to afford fine furnishings, and often relied on inherited furniture or simply made functional pieces. With 5 people living in such a small dwelling, large furniture would have taken up valuable living space. In the southwest corner of this room is a small closet opening to the space beneath the stairs to the attic. In this day, closets were a rare and valuable commodity. From this bedroom, an even narrower winding staircase leads to the last room in the house. This attic space, also known as a garret, was always finished as a room.
Wow, I can't believe Poe came from a house that small with 5 people in their family.
A lot of people are really surprised about the house. But I think that a lot of people ask me what I want people to sort of take away from their experience at Poe House, and I definitely want people to understand that great things can come from very humble beginnings, and then I also want people to know that my organization, Poe Baltimore, our mission is to preserve his legacy here in Baltimore, and it's very important for us for people to understand that the macabre persona that people sort of know him for because of his writing, because of the darkness in his work, that's not the only thing. He was a very complicated man, he was a very interesting man, and when they learn about his life in Baltimore, when they learn about how his family formed here, and they learn that he was the father of detective fiction, he's the father of mystery fiction, such an amazing, amazing life. It's not just a fun house, it's not a horror house or anything like that. It's making his history accessible so that his legacy lives on.
Definitely. And we're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
We are so really interested in Poe's life because of the movie Eureka Man. The poem alone is in the case, and I'm sure there's some rumors as to how Poe died and what ailed him and what pushed him to the brink of death. What is your theory? You're around all the materials. You've seen the photos. What's your theory?
My theory is that, I mean, one of the best theories is he was attacked by a group. It wasn't unusual during political campaigns that the famous mob town part of Baltimore came out, and there were people around who engaged in intimidation, getting people either to not vote or to vote a certain way. And he could very well have been attacked, and that may be, that's one of the theories, that he was left to die, and when he was found, he was pretty much, almost comatose, I guess. So it's a sad ending to a really important man. He wasn't all that old.
Welcome back, and we still have Enrica Jang here from the Poe House, and she's going to be telling us a little bit more.
We were very fortunate as an organization to be able to guide the reopening of the Edgar Allan Poe House for the public. We're very excited this year that we've been able to open an additional day. So as people come and visit the city, it's a natural thing. They visit his resting place, and then they want to see where Poe lived here in Baltimore. So it's natural for them to come and try to find us, and we're very happy to be able to be open an extra day. This year we're open a few more months of the year as well, and we're trying to be very consistent in being open to the public and bringing Poe's history to everyone.
It's awesome.
But it's been a wonderful experience to come on to the organization. I think that we're still very young, only 3 or 4 years old, and a lot of our mission was focused on reopening the house and interpreting the house. And now, because we've got our feet under us, and we hit 10,000 visitors last year, a 600 square foot house hit 10,000 visitors last year. So and we're looking to see more this year, and it's so uplifting to see this intense interest in Poe and the excitement when people see where he came from.
Well, speaking of the opening, we actually have a clip here for everyone to watch.
Welcome to my home. Hello, welcome to my home.
You have a beautiful home.
Thank you so much. Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this morning at this exciting event.
I'd like to raise a glass of Martell Cognac to Poe, to honor him and the Poe enthusiasm in Baltimore and around the world. To Poe, as we stand in front of the house where he once lived, wrote, and loved. Thank you. All right, so now we have the symbolic passing of Poe from the city of Baltimore to Poe Baltimore Incorporated, and your very able representative. So with this, I pass the Poe House from the city of Baltimore to Poe Baltimore Incorporated. God bless you, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. A little bit, the house will be open for tours, and
We're at the Poe House, and I'm here with Kristen Harbison, who is the president of Poe Baltimore. Thank you for talking with us. Can you tell us a little bit about Poe Baltimore?
Sure. We are the brand new nonprofit. We were formed with the mission of protecting, exploring, and celebrating the legacy of Edgar Allan Poe, not only at the Edgar Allan Poe House behind me, but also in Baltimore and beyond. His legacy is phenomenal in art, in literature, in music, in everywhere. So, but the house obviously is our heartbeat, our telltale heartbeat, as it were.
And in addition to the house, are there any artifacts on display that were actually used by?
Absolutely. We have, my favorite is the traveling writing desk. It's very typical of 19th century writing desks. I have one very similar to it at home, but this one is special because this one belonged to Edgar Allan Poe. We have a chair, which so you can imagine him sitting in the chair with the writing desk on his lap, writing.
Wow, that was such a great scene. Now, why don't you tell me how you got involved?
Unfortunately, I missed that sort of beginning inception of the sort of rebirth of the house. But coming into this organization, Poe Baltimore, our mission is to preserve Poe's legacy.
Now, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I was a literature major, and I got a master's degree in writing. But my love of Poe, all the way from childhood, that is done. So as a writer, absolutely fascinated with his work, and I happened to meet the folks in the organization and make those connections as a vendor I was published promoting my own book.
Oh, wow.
I wrote a book that was an adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's Cask of Amontillado and a sequel to Cask called The House of Montresor. And so in promoting that book and in working with the folks from the house or interacting with the folks from the house and that shared love of Poe, when the opportunity came up to join the organization, I jumped on it. And I was so excited that they recognized that work. I had edited a collection of comics inspired by Poe and just had a keen interest. I had also edited a collection of comics called Poe Twisted Anthology at my own publishing house, and had an opportunity to work with other artists and writers who were inspired by Poe. So had this wonderful love and experience that I could bring to the organization, and I think that they, I think that's why they picked me to help to join this effort. But then also, I joke with people that I already owned an Edgar Allan Poe bobblehead, and I think that once they knew I had that on my desk, they knew I was serious. So.
Definitely. All right, we're going to go to a break now, but we'll be right back.
And talk to each other. Okay, and cut.
Here I am now with Courtney Wilson, who's the executive director of the B&O Railway Museum in Baltimore. And you're also on the board of Poe Baltimore, is that right?
I am, as of yesterday.
Great, great. And is there a relationship between the B&O and Poe Baltimore?
Absolutely, we're best neighbors ever, right down the street. And actually, historically, Edgar took a train trip from the location of the museum out to Ellicott City to visit with his friend John Pendleton Kennedy in 1833.
And he probably rode the rails many other times that aren't documented.
No doubt about it. In fact, he was taking a train back to New York from Richmond when he was found in Baltimore and ultimately died.
How many people do you have on an average weekend at the B&O?
At the B&O? Gosh, we'll have anywhere from 600 to 800 people come through.
Wow. And you think a lot of those will be coming over here to the Poe House?
We're going to promote the Poe House very heavily and hope that our visitors who come from around the world will take the time to come over and see this.
And a little while ago, we witnessed the symbolic passing of the raven from the mayor of Baltimore to Poe Baltimore.
I happen to have that very famous raven right here in my hand.
Yes, very nice, very nice.
For years, for years, the city of Baltimore, 30 years, operated this house. And because of budgetary constraints, the city made a decision last year about this time that they could no longer sustain the operation of the house. And that's how all this got started. And it's just been a labor of love for us at the B&O, and it's been a labor of love for the city. And we've worked together hand in hand to create this new, grand, reinvented and reimagined attraction for Baltimore.
Wow, that was such a great clip. Now she's going to tell us a little bit more about the Poe House.
That was such an exciting beginning for this organization. Even though Poe's legacy stretches back so many generations, we are a fairly new organization. Poe Baltimore, our mission is to maintain and interpret the Poe House, but then also to preserve his legacy here in Baltimore. So we're working on programming, and we're working on enhancing visitors' experience to the house. I think at the beginning of any organization, the rebirth of the house, it's keeping the lights on, keeping it running. But we had 10,000 visitors last year. It's a 620 square foot house, so to have that many people want to come and experience Poe Baltimore and Poe's Baltimore and learn about his life here is amazing. And we are looking to top that number this year. We're already 30% ahead of the previous year. So such an exciting time for us. And we can really focus on improving, because you'll see new exhibits, and you're going to see, and like I said, we're open additional hours this year to welcome more people in.
Tell me about your favorite Edgar Allan Poe piece.
Oh, well, I gave myself away. My favorite piece is Cask of Amontillado. My favorite story, absolute from the way back. But I just have a love and affinity for all of it. As an editor, getting to work with artists who are inspired by Poe and writers who are inspired by Poe, I've had the opportunity to learn backwards going forward. Excitement for different stories and the oval portrait and the poetry and all of it's been wonderful. I also had this really great experience, just came back from my first trip to Italy and had an opportunity to visit Rome and Venice. And it's so strange because, to my knowledge, Poe never visited those places, but he wrote about them. He wrote about the Colosseum and he wrote about Venice. And to go visit the Bridge of Sighs in Venice and be in this location that he imagined in his brain that I saw because I read his work was an amazing thing. So it's just that experience of the generations has been a lot of fun. And I think that that's why we fall in love with writers, when they take us someplace really exciting and we connect to the world in a completely different way because of their work. So Poe does that for me, and I hope that we can help do that for other people and bring that experience to folks.
All right, we're going to go to a break now, but we'll be right back.
And in 1971, the Pratt Library was designated the state library basically for Maryland. So we received special funds to provide services to all of the citizens of Maryland and the library systems in Maryland. So we run the computer system, Sailor for instance. And the other thing that makes us a unique state resource is we have a wonderful collection of materials, books and materials, interesting things like a lock of Edgar Allan Poe's hair, a piece of his coffin that we display at certain times.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Abby, and we still have my guest Enrica Jang here, and she's going to finish up with telling us a little bit more about the Poe House.
Well, we are at the height of the season now. We're really in it now. June was a huge jump in people, and July is looking to be just as busy. So, but we do encourage people to come out. We're open Thursday through Sunday from 11 to 4 every day, and we'll come on in, walk through the door, and you will see the house that Poe lived in while he was in Baltimore for 2 years. We also have a couple of really great exhibits that are coming up. We have a From the Vaults exhibit that we're going to be opening in July, and that's an exciting collection of art that's been hidden away for a long time. It's a collection of paintings of Poe and of people in Poe's life, and we're really excited to bring that to the house. And then we're going to be bringing back an exhibit from the Baltimore Camera Club featuring images of the house, and that's in our new 2018 calendar. So people can take a look at this wonderful photography from local artists, and then they can also pick up a calendar for 2018. So visit our website, poebaltimore.org, and check out some of the latest stuff. And don't want to forget, every second Sunday of the month we have live poetry in the house. So that's an exciting bit for writers and poets who want to come and be part of the community.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for being a guest on my show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, I can't wait to learn some more. Until next time.
I first fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe when I was just 10 years old. My mother bought me a set of the New Wonder World Encyclopedia, and there in Volume 5, Treasures of Literature, on page 37 was the poem Annabel Lee. I thought it the most beautiful love poem and was sure that the writer was a true romantic and really loved the girl in the poem. Later I would see the movie The Murders in the Rue Morgue with Carl Malden, and it was truly the most fascinating detective story I had ever come across next to Sherlock Holmes. It was also a shock and horror story and showed the other side of my beloved Mr. Poe. We all remember the American international films Mask of the Red Death, Pit and the Pendulum, The House of Ushers, and many more. This kept me well nourished till I grew up and could study Mr. Poe more in-depthly in college. His tragic death at only 40 is truly a mystery. I had read most of his books except for Eureka. This is my hypothesis to what really happened. This is an odd assortment of pieces, interviews, and reenactments, as was Mr. Poe, an odd sort. And now I give to you the Eureka Man.